There are things people have caught on camera that don't fit into any known category of life.
Keep it down, keep it down.
Not animals, not humans, and definitely not something we'll easily find around us. So stay with me to watch the most terrifying creatures caught in real time.
Its tail.
A group of explorers had been tracking something through a dense woodland for a while, before they finally caught up to it. When they did, they made the decision to try and capture it. That turned out to be harder than anyone expected. The footage shows the group struggling to hold the creature down, and even with multiple people involved, it was clearly putting up a fight they weren't prepared for. What they had their hands on had wings like a bat, but nothing else about it matched anything you'd find in a nature book. The shape, the build, the way it moved was completely alien. They couldn't hold it, and eventually it broke free. No ordinary arrest. Colombian police were filmed struggling to restrain something in broad daylight, and the crowd gathered around them clearly had no idea what they were looking at either. Multiple officers worked together just to keep it contained, which already tells you this was no ordinary arrest. But what caught everyone's attention was visible right behind the officer's large, gray, leathery wings folded against the creature's back. Locals who witnessed it claimed it had fallen from the sky moments before. Whatever the Colombian authorities took into custody that day, they weren't talking about it afterward. Field stalker. A man filming near his village cornfield got a lot more than he bargained for. Standing at the edge of the field was a creature that walked upright like a human, but had the head, fur, and glowing yellow eyes of a large cat. Dark gray, muscular, and completely still, it just stared directly at the camera. No fear, no movement. The tail hanging behind it made the whole thing even harder to process. Nobody in the village could explain where it came from or where it went afterward. Cave pack. A camera was rolling when a group of figures emerged from a cave entrance in the mountains and just kept walking, moving together in a tight pack, exactly the way wolves move with their group. Up close, they had wolf-like heads and features, but their bodies moved upright like humans. The way they coordinated with each other suggested intelligence, not animal instinct. Some researchers who reviewed this clip believe these could be a branch of early humans that evolution took in a completely different direction, one that history never recorded. Horned and upright. A young man out in the woods pressed himself against a tree and stayed completely silent, phone already recording. Just ahead of him, something was moving through the forest, on two legs, upright, human-sized.
Stay calm. Don't look up here. Please don't look up here.
But carrying a full set of deer antlers on its head. It wasn't grazing. It wasn't running. It was actively moving with purpose, through the trees like it was hunting.
Oh God. Keep going.
The man made the smart decision to stay hidden and not make a single sound. He watched it pass and waited until it was completely out of sight before he even moved. River dweller. Filmed through the branches along an Indian riverbank, this footage took patience to get. The man behind the camera had spotted this creature sitting by the water several times before, but could never get close enough. The moment it sensed anyone nearby, it would slip straight into the river and disappear. This time he kept his distance and stayed quiet. What he captured was a gray, slender figure sitting on the rocks at the water's edge, long hair hanging down, with a tail curling behind it. It sat completely still, like it was resting between dives. The locals in the area had reportedly been avoiding that stretch of the river for years. Cursed and bound. Someone had already done the hard work of tying this thing down before the camera started rolling. It had the body of a man, but the head of an animal, and it was screaming at everyone in the room with its mouth wide open. The man standing closest to it wasn't trying to study it or photograph it. He was pressing a Christian cross onto it, convinced that what was inside this creature had nothing to do with reality. However, the video cuts off before anyone can understand what is happening. Spain's discovery. Spanish Guardia civil officers were filmed carrying something through a crowd with the kind of body language that comes with a significant find. Cradled in one officer's arms was a small, dark, matted creature, wet, hunched, with long, tangled hair, covering most of its face. The officers around it were composed, but the crowd was not. Locals who gathered at the scene were convinced this wasn't a wildlife discovery. Several of them openly called it a divine punishment, something sent down onto their land as a warning. The officers kept moving and said nothing to the people surrounding them. Finally, caught. 2 men carried it through the village street in broad daylight, while the entire community followed behind them. Thin, gray, with large, leathery wings pinned to its sides, the creature hung limp between them, but was still very much alive. According to locals, this thing had been held in custody for years, before it broke free and started moving through the surrounding area. It took the whole village working together to bring it back down. The crowd that trailed behind those 2 men had clearly been waiting a long time for this moment. Caged cryptid rural residents managed to capture this and lock it behind bars, which, given what's sitting in that cage, took considerable effort. The creature grips the bars with human hands, stares back at the camera with amber eyes, and carries a full set of antlers on a head that is clearly not human, but close enough to make everyone uncomfortable. A section of people who studied the footage online landed on a theory that this wasn't born naturally, that somewhere, in a lab that won't be named publicly, something like this was deliberately made. If that theory holds, the scientists responsible have stayed very quiet about it. Farm catch workers on a Mexican farm had been hearing strange noises around the property for a few nights before they finally cornered it. What they tied down and left on the ground for their boss to see was gray, hairless, and built in a way that made everyone keep their distance, even after it stopped moving. The farmer didn't dare to go close, and patiently waited for the authorities. They later came and took the creature away from the public's eye. Something in the shallows. At first glance, anyone would call this a crocodile and move on, but watch carefully and things start adding up wrong. The body is crocodilian, but the tail doesn't match any known species. The shape and movement are completely off. And the face is worse. The snout appears collapsed inward, like the bones underneath never grew correctly. Locals near this riverbank reportedly refused to go near that stretch of water after the footage surfaced. Whatever is living in that river, it isn't something anyone has officially named yet. Talking goat. This one divides people straight down the middle. A dark horned creature sits behind cage bars, and according to everyone present when this was filmed, it was having an actual conversation.
Ya caíste en la trampa, desgraciado. Ahora sí dinos quién eres antes de que te caiga.
Salga de aquí, te voy a destripar. Y me voy a llevar tu alma al infierno por haberme atrapado.
The people who caught it claim it had a chip installed somewhere inside it that gave it the ability to speak. Half the people who've seen this footage call it staged immediately. The other half points to the way it holds eye contact with whoever is speaking to it, and that part is harder to explain away.
Y me voy a llevar tu alma al infierno por haberme atrapado.
En nombre del Padre y del Hijo te ordeno que...
Wrong, dog. 2 officers on a routine night patrol spotted what they thought was a stray dog and moved in to handle it. The moment they got close enough, that assumption fell apart. The creature thrashing in the officer's grip had the rough shape of a canine, but the face was stretched wrong. Jaw too wide, teeth too many, one red eye catching the light in a way no dog's eye does. His partner kept the camera rolling while he struggled to keep it contained. Whatever they had stopped for that night, it was not something either of them had been trained to deal with. Horned desert thing out in an open stretch of empty land, someone spotted a lone figure standing in the distance and zoomed in. Thin, dark, upright, with 2 distinct horns rising from its head. It wasn't moving much, just standing there in the middle of nowhere with nothing around it for miles. The man filming was convinced almost immediately that what he was looking at matched descriptions of creatures talked about in regional mythology for generations. Japan, forest creatures. Deep inside a forest in Japan, someone with a camera stumbled across something that had no business being there. Perched on the stumps of half-cut trees were 4 dark figures, completely still, like they had been waiting there for a long time. At first glance, you might convince yourself they were large birds, but as the camera moved closer, that explanation fell apart fast. 2 of them slowly spread their wings open, and the size alone was enough to make whoever was filming take a step back. Nobody in the comments section could agree on what species this was, because no known species fits what that footage shows. Beach light. Late at night, on an empty beach, someone caught a glowing humanoid figure moving across the sand at the water's edge, fully luminescent, shaped like a person, moving with purpose before disappearing toward the shoreline. Coastal folklore across dozens of cultures has described beings that cross between the ocean and the surface world after dark. Most people write those stories off, but whatever left those footprints in the sand that night came from the water, and it went back the same way. Mexico's rooftop. Someone in a Mexican neighborhood noticed something on a rooftop that didn't belong there. Pale, upright, clinging to a pole with limbs that were far too long for its body, the figure held a posture that made everyone watching deeply uncomfortable. Locals gathered below were already recording and reacting out loud, completely shaken by what they were seeing. The eyes caught the light in a way that animal eyes do, not human ones. Cryptid researchers who analyzed the footage pointed to similar sightings reported in the same region going back several decades. Rat-faced. A farmer had been losing animals for weeks before he decided to stay up and wait in the dark. What he caught that night took an entire group of people to tie down. The head was unmistakably rat-like, oversized, with red eyes and yellow teeth, but the body was upright and dressed in tattered clothing. The crowd that gathered around it that night in Africa couldn't agree on what to do next. They probably handed it over to the authorities, because no one was allowed to talk about this incident afterward. Teeth of the deep. A fisherman pulled up his net and found something in it that made him stop completely. The creature looked like a fish from the outside, but when it opened its mouth, it had a full set of human teeth. And it kept opening and closing it in a way that looked uncomfortably, like screaming with no sound coming out. He held it long enough to film it, genuinely unsure whether to throw it back or hand it over to someone. Marine biologists who were shown the clip were split between severe mutation from water contamination and something that has been living at the bottom of the ocean long before we started looking down there. Mountain myth. High up in the mountains, a group of tourists spotted something perched on a rock that stopped them dead in their tracks. They started recording immediately. What they captured was a creature with the full body and talons of a large eagle, but sitting on top of those wings was a human head, long dark hair, a defined face, completely calm. Even after it saw the tourists, it calmly flew in the air. As if not bothered by their existence. Frozen encounter. Deep in a Russian winter, someone filmed two dark figures moving across a frozen landscape at the edge of the woods. They weren't stumbling through the snow the way any animal would in those temperatures. They were moving fast, upright, coordinating with each other like they knew exactly where they were going. Lizard-like build, long limbs, completely unbothered by the cold. What gets people is that there are two of them. One unusual sighting is easy to question. Two of the same things moving together is a different conversation entirely. Chained creature. Whoever chained it knew exactly what they were dealing with. At the end of it was a creature with glowing yellow eyes, spiked limbs, and an aggression level that made the people holding that chain visibly nervous. It lunged repeatedly, testing how much slack it had, looking for the right moment. According to the caption from the original account, it had been struck down by a rocket before being captured, which raises an entirely different set of questions about who fired it and why they were prepared for something like this in the first place. Midnight Walker. Past midnight, on a quiet residential street, a man held his phone up and didn't run. The creature walking toward him was built low to the ground, dark and heavy, with large curved ram horns sitting on a face that was nothing close to a ram.
Meu Deus. Morou! Tá na boca! Morou! Tá na boca!
It came uncomfortably close to the camera and just kept moving, no aggression, no acknowledgement, like the man standing there simply didn't register as a threat worth stopping for. That detail bothered viewers more than anything else about the footage. The idea that something like that could walk through a neighborhood at night and consider a human being beneath its attention is genuinely unsettling. Road crawler. Late at night, on a completely empty road, someone caught this on camera, and you can hear them go quiet the second they see it. A dark, spined creature was moving across the asphalt on all fours, growling in a way that didn't sound like any animal from around there. The woods nearby had been giving locals a bad feeling for a while. Turns out they weren't wrong about something living in there. It just finally decided to cross the road. Riverbank find. A man, heading to the river for water, stopped the moment he saw it crouching at the bank ahead of him. He filmed from behind the grass without making a sound. The creature was pale, hairless, and hunched over the water's edge. The pointed ears sitting high on the sides of its head and the deeply wrinkled face made it clear that it was an otherworldly entity. It moved slowly, completely unbothered, like it had been using that riverbank long before anyone built a village nearby. The man turned around and went home thirsty. Lizard Man
back after nearly a decade without a sighting. Bishopville's mythical beast seems to be popping up again.
Bishopville, South Carolina has had a lizard man problem since 1988, when Christopher Davis reported a 7-foot creature with red eyes leaping out of Scape Ore Swamp and biting into his car. People laughed it off for decades.
So he comes out in the car. And I mean, we're just like, oh my God, what could have done this?
Then after nearly 10 years of nothing, 2 separate witnesses sent in photos and video footage over the same weekend. The Lee County Museum has sightings documented all the way back to Native American times. So the real question isn't whether it exists, it's where it's been hiding. Mexico's giant. Every major ancient civilization, the Greeks, the Mayans, the Egyptians left behind records of giants walking the earth. Most historians filed those accounts under mythology and moved on. Then footage like this surfaces from the mountains of Mexico, showing something enormous crouched at the mouth of a cave, peering out at whoever was filming from a distance. The sheer size of it against the surrounding rock face is what stops people cold. Ancient texts describe giants retreating into mountains and caves as human populations grew. This cave in Mexico might be exactly why those stories never fully went away. New Mexico terror. A family in New Mexico had been dealing with this for weeks before they finally caught it on camera. They filmed it from behind a partially closed door, too afraid to step outside. Under the streetlight, a hunched humanoid figure moved erratically in front of their home, knocking things over, moving in ways that didn't follow any natural pattern, then stopping completely as if it sensed it was being watched. This wasn't its first visit. The family reported it had been appearing out of nowhere at night, causing chaos outside their house, then vanishing before anyone could get a proper look. That night, they finally had proof. Pole Screamer residents of a rural town stepped outside after hearing something shrieking from above and found this perched on top of a utility, pale, hunched over the wires, staring down at the people gathering below it. The shrieking didn't stop the whole time it sat up there. Then, without much warning, it spread out and lifted off into the dark, leaving behind a street full of shaken people and absolutely no explanation from local authorities about what had been sitting above their homes that night. Trail cam visitors. Trail cameras get triggered by all kinds of things at night, but a farmer checking his footage one morning found something that made him look twice, then a third time. 2 humanoid figures, tall and thin, standing upright in the darkness. That alone would have been enough. But a second trail cam on the same property caught them again, this time crouching low, like they were examining something on the ground. 2 different cameras, 2 different positions, same 2 figures. Their proportions were off in ways that are genuinely hard to describe. Not quite right for a human being. Whatever they were doing out there in the middle of the night, they seemed completely unbothered by the cameras. Rooftop attack. Residents in a Chinese neighborhood noticed it crouched on a rooftop, first dark feathers covering its body, a face that was uncomfortably human, staring down at the street below. Nobody moved fast enough. It came down before anyone could react and went straight for the people nearby. The camera caught the full panic, locals scattering, screaming, trying to get away from something that was actively hunting them in broad daylight. Chinese authorities who responded to the scene gave no official statement about what had attacked those residents that afternoon. Philippine woods. Deep in a Philippine forest, a group of locals came across a large, dark figure standing upright between the trees and started filming without getting any closer. It was covered in black hair, from head to toe, built heavily, and stood there watching them back. The debate that broke out afterward was arguably more unsettling than the footage itself. Half the people who saw it insisted it matched descriptions of a creature from local mythology. The other half couldn't shake the feeling that this was once a human being, someone who had walked into those woods a long time ago and simply never came back out. Trail cam terror. A trail camera set up deep in woods that locals had been uneasy about for years finally captured something on film. Standing directly in front of the lens was a creature with a goat's head, glowing eyes, muscular human torso, and the hind legs of an animal upright, aware, staring straight into the camera. In Greek and Celtic mythology, figures matching this exact description have been documented for thousands of years. The difference is that those were always dismissed as folklore. But whatever triggered that trail cam that night walked out of the trees on 2 legs and extremely realistic. Japan's giant. Somewhere in the mountain ranges of Japan, a man kept his distance and let the camera do the work. What was moving through the open terrain ahead of him was massive, 4-legged, covered in thick dorsal spikes running down its back, with a tail that dragged behind it in a way that paleontologists would find very familiar. According to the cameraman, such creatures are described in Japanese folklore, but he never knew they existed until he captured one. South India. Sighting captured in South India. This footage shows something extremely strange. Standing on the edge of a rooftop against the evening sky was a dark, winged figure, upright, perfectly still. The silhouette alone was enough to stop anyone in their tracks. Then it spread its wings wide, full, and deliberate, and lifted off the building cleanly, without any of the struggle a bird that size would need, making it clear that it was indeed a mythical creature caught on camera. Goatman drone footage over an open field picked up something walking alone across the dry ground below. Black, upright, with 2 small horns visible from above, moving at a steady pace like it had a destination in mind. Farmers in the area had been reporting missing cattle for months before this was captured. Some of them had a name for whatever was taking their animals. Watching this footage, that name doesn't seem so far-fetched anymore. The rake. November 5th, 2023. A man driving through an abandoned forest road in Ohio suddenly had something step into his headlights and stop, pale, hairless, arms hanging too low, standing in a way that no human body is built to stand.
Whoa! Okay, you know what? I'm just gonna run.
He kept the camera on it for as long as he could, but the footage cut off abruptly because that's when it started moving toward the car. According to him, they floored it and didn't look back. People who follow cryptid sightings recognized it immediately. Ohio has had rake reports going back years, but nobody had caught it this clearly before. Doc Visitor. This video is old, but it keeps coming back, and every time it does, more people start asking questions. Someone out on the water managed to catch a shaky but watchable clip of something resting against a dock human upper body, face turning toward the camera the moment it sensed it was being filmed. The proportions don't match anything you'd expect to find floating out there. People have been going back and forth over this footage for years, and the answer hasn't gotten any clearer. Camp Discovery. Nobody on the camping trip was prepared for what their flashlight hit on the ground that night. Massive, multi-legged white and gray, patterned across a segmented body that kept going longer than it had any right to. The campers stood around it, arguing about what they were actually looking at. One of them said out loud, what a few others were already thinking, that this had lab written all over it. Something created, studied, and then quietly released into the wild when it became too inconvenient to keep. River Anomaly. Local fishermen along this stretch of river had been calling something off about the water for a while before one of them finally got it on camera. Sitting at the bank where the water meets the reeds was a creature that didn't belong to any category they knew, too large for what it appeared to be, moving in a way that didn't match anything swimming or crawling in that river. Scientists who were sent the footage gave no clean answer. The fishermen went back to calling it what they'd always called it, a river anomaly, and started avoiding that part of the water. Real werewolf. There's a road in a remote town that locals already knew to avoid at night. This man drove through it anyway. Something dark pushed out of the bushes ahead of him and stopped in the road. He heard the growl before he fully registered what he was looking at. Then it dropped into a crouch and started moving toward the car, slow and deliberate. He was already stepping back by then. By the time it picked up speed, he had the car turned around and was gone. The footage he captured in those few seconds has been making rounds ever since. Pacific Encounter. Far out in open water, a fishing boat crew spotted something surfacing alongside them and grabbed the camera fast. It floated upright, pale, with a rounded head and a face that didn't belong on anything they'd pulled from those waters before. The crew called it a mermaid without hesitating, not because it matched any storybook image, but because they had no other word for it. The honest truth is that the deep ocean has barely been explored, and whatever mermaids actually look like, there's no reason to think anyone has gotten it right yet. Rooftop Croucher. The homeowner stepped outside at night and noticed 2 glowing eyes watching them from the rooftop directly above. By the time they got the camera up, it was already crouching at the edge, completely still, staring down. Skinwalker sightings follow a pattern that researchers have documented across the American Southwest for decades. Rooftops, tree lines, the edges of properties at night. This footage fits that pattern exactly. A few seconds after the recording started, it was gone. No sound, no movement caught on camera, just an empty roofline where something had been sitting a moment before. And now let us move on towards the subscribers' pick of the day. This video shows something strange caught near a quiet riverbank. At first, it looks like a person, just standing there in the shallow water. But then, you notice something is not right. Its body looks human, but behind it, there's a long, heavy tail dragging across the sand.
There's something by the shore.
The way it stands feels unnatural, almost like it doesn't belong there. Then suddenly, the figure slowly moves toward the river. Fishermen along that stretch have been reporting a tall shadow walking the shallows at dusk ever since. So what do you think it was? Let me know in the comments below.